A portion of today's video is sponsored by Ugreen. I have an excuse to talk about one of my favorite handhelds that I just haven't talked about in a while, and I'm gonna take it. It's been a little while since I last talked about the Analogue Pocket, a handheld gaming system that released in early 21 after a lot of delays and shipping questions, and has gone through quite a number of updates and revisions since release. All of which is stuff worth touching on. But the first thing I want to talk about is their recent special edition version of the system that glows in the dark. These went up for pre-order and went out very quickly. Analogue actually ended up just sending a unit over for me to unbox and check out, which is the one you're seeing in this video, so thank you to them for that. But this is basically the same device internally, function-wise and everything, but with a glow-in-the-dark plastic and paint that really glows in the dark. As someone who grew up in the 90s, there was a lot of stuff out there that would glow in the dark, including some kids out there, you might have had some stars in your room plastered on the walls that would glow when you're going to sleep. I definitely had that growing up. But this thing, once given a healthy dose of light, put into a dark room, really has a striking phosphorescence. So much so that, to be honest, I don't know how much I'd actually want to use this one in the dark, because I sometimes like being able to just focus on what's on the display itself and just be sucked into the game and have nothing else visible. But if you like seeing your system in the dark as well, it's gonna stand out. It's a really nifty idea, and it makes me very curious whether or not Analogue is going to be doing more special edition releases like this. They've done that in the past for some of their other devices. They've had multiple color finishes for a couple different ones, but I think the Pocket, being one of their particularly more popular releases, opens up to some more options like this in the future. And personally, I would love to see if they maybe tackled a clear direction with it. Something they've messed a little bit in the past with, like the Super NT that had a clear shell design, but something that really evokes that kind of Game Boy Color atomic purple look. Because that to me is still the pinnacle of like Nintendo handheld design. I love the atomic purple Game Boy Color, and the Pocket obviously owing much of its design to looking like that era of Game Boy, but a bit fancier, I think could really flourish with that kind of design. Speaking of fancy looking designs, I want to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, Ugreen. This is the Nexode RG 65 watt charger from Ugreen, a charge block that's not only efficient, but tops off its functionality with a super cute design that can make it a great addition to your desk setup. With the little provided feet cover, the Nexode can chill on your desk as a cute little robot, and when needed, you can pick it up, plug it into your nearest outlet, and charge up to 3 devices simultaneously, with little emoji faces on the charge brick itself to let you know when everything is done charging. Thanks to taking advantage of a GAN chip, the Nexode is able to supply 65 watt charging while also keeping a nice trim little body, and even more importantly, cuts down on heat production, allowing for a charge brick that is both powerful but also much more environmentally friendly. The robotic looking shell also helps keep the brick's heat in check and acts as a protective shell. Once again, combining functionality with a cute looking aesthetic. And if you're interested in learning more about these, or even want to pick one up, I do have a link posted down below in the description. On top of that, until October 8th, you can take advantage of this coupon code right here to save an extra 20% off. You'll also be able to find that coupon code down below in the description. And if you happen to miss the last time I talked about this thing or any other videos about it, the basic idea behind the Analogue Pocket is that it is the handheld focused platform that Analogue has released. Analogue has done a whole bunch of different special, high price but very fancy ways of playing old school games, and the Pocket is their handheld focused device that at its core is able to play Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games, but with adapters can open up to other systems like the Sega Game Gear. And it accomplishes this with a form of hardware emulation. Analogue themselves really likes to push this narrative of saying that no emulation is involved, which isn't really entirely accurate. The point is that it's not using software emulation that is used by a lot of other more affordable retro gameplay devices, but in the case of the Pocket, it's making use of a pair of FPGAs that is basically making it so that as far as games can tell, they are being ran on their original hardware, which is, again, a hardware level of emulation that does allow for a more accurate representation, but at the end of the day is still emulation, and every now and then you are going to run into some games, maybe not running identically as they would on original hardware, but getting pretty close. And the real selling point of the Pocket isn't really just that it's able to play these games, but more so that it has a built-in display that is a much higher resolution that allows for a truly crisp-looking image that makes a lot of these older games look better than ever compared to running on the original hardware, including giving you a few ways of fine-tuning this image or even trying to recreate certain styles of it. For instance, if you're running an old-school Game Boy game on it, yeah, you can play using the default analog style look that is a very simple black lines on a clean white background, but if you want, you could switch it over to a original DMG Game Boy style where it's going to be that green background on it. Switch it over to looking like something like the GB Lite, where it has a more kind of blue-toned background to it, giving you ways of recreating the experience of what these looked like on the older systems, but still with a much cleaner looking image than was really ever possible on that old hardware. Now, at the time when this originally released, it was still relatively bare bones and focused more on just being able to play the games directly without adding a lot of additional features. And since that release time, a lot more stuff has been added to the firmware of the system that opens it up a bit more. For instance, something that was talked about at launch but not available when the system first released was the ability to do save states. While this is running games directly off of the original cartridges and you're able to maintain just simply relying on the saves of those cartridges and saving to there is now an additional system level option to do save states if you would like as well. So on top of whatever is natively just saved to the card itself, you can do separate save states stored to the Analogue's memory, so you're able to just immediately load from there. This opens up the ability to save in places that games previously may not have allowed you to. There's also this interesting new library function where basically as you play games on the Pocket, it remembers and catalogs all the different games that you've played, so you have a way of viewing a digital version of your library where you can just be like, oh hey, here's all the games I own, a little bit of background information on them, like who developed them, what year they were originally released in. It's just a nice little way of having a curated list of your games inside the Pocket itself. It doesn't add any kind of digital ability to just play them afterwards. You're not dumping any cards into the actual system memory to where you could play them like ROMs. But as someone who appreciates and has what I would consider a curated collection of games that I really enjoy, it's nice to be able to view them on the Pocket directly themselves. There's also been a lot of compatibility updates, in particular for the dock for the Analogue, which is actually something I haven't even talked about yet, alongside being able to play games directly on the Analogue Pocket itself, which is honestly, I think, the best way to play a lot of stuff. You do also have the option to dock the system so that it can be hooked up to a modern display. This is also a really easy way to do things like game capture, if you want to have a really clean game capture of old school Game Boy games. And as part of all the updates it's received over time, this has opened up a lot more controllers that can be used with the dock directly, including a lot of modern day options like using an Xbox Series X or S controller directly Bluetooth connected to the dock, not needing any kind of cable attached whatsoever. There are a lot of ways that you could play and experience your old favorite classics, whether those are games that Nintendo themselves have made available on things like Nintendo Switch Online, having the actual old carts to play on the original hardware. Emulation is certainly also a popular option, especially with how many different emulation-focused devices have just been flooding the market over the past few years. But there is something about the Pocket's approach that I just personally find really appealing. It's not cheap, and there are certainly other options out there that are more affordable and even probably a better option for people to just be able to quickly get their hands on playing a lot of older school stuff. But the ability to take the actual carts that I had growing up, having the original physical copies of games available and being able to play those saves directly and continue them on this newer device with a beautiful looking display just really hits a balance point for me that I absolutely love. That balance of being able to use your actual old games and have updated experiences with them just really hits home for me the right way. And while there are numerous ways that you can get better looking images out of traditional console type stuff where you can work with upscalers or a lot of HDMI conversions, and there's ways of making those work better with modern displays, there's not really as simple of an equivalent for that for handhelds. And I think that's why a dedicated device like the Pocket really resonates with me, especially since now it can basically act as the home for so many different systems if you stay on top of having the different adapters they've released for it as well. It's not for everyone, but almost 2 years after having my hands on the system, it's still my favorite way of playing games from those libraries when it's something that I do have on hand physically. Even when it comes to the convenience of things like being able to play games on Nintendo Switch Online, comparing the experience of playing, say, the recent Legend of Zelda Oracle games on there versus playing my actual old carts on the Pocket, there's certainly a convenience that comes with the Switch, but running the actual hardware and the crispness of the Pocket display is just really a totally different experience in my mind. So that's just kind of a 2-year later look at using the Analogue Pocket. To be honest, a large reason why they made this video is just because the glow-in-the-dark one looks so clean, and I loved the excuse to just talk about this thing again because I haven't for a while on the channel. Given the way that Analogue operates, it's not super easy to always get a hold of their hardware. I'll have a link posted down below if you want to take a look at being able to potentially pre-order the system and see what the delays on those are right now. But the hardware itself is just wonderful. As always, if you guys enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up button to let me know. Subscribe if you haven't yet, and I'll see you guys later.